How you doing, guys? This is Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. Like I mentioned, I have to be very careful with this video so it doesn't get demonetized or get a strike against me or whatever. But I want to be very clear that this video is a thought exercise based on things that other people have said, and in no way is encouraging any sort of any activity, let alone violent activity or anything like that. But the topic of this video is when people, I've seen a lot of comments over the past couple years, but specifically over the past few months, that are talking about how people who want to leave the country, or even it goes as far as to go to like a remote property or remote homestead or something like that, are basically running away, or and that we should stay and fight, sort of thing. Or this goes for any country too. Canada, it's not just the U.S., Australia, whatever. Um, and basically the idea is you shouldn't abandon your country, you should stay and fight, whatever, blah blah blah. I don't necessarily disagree with that notion in general. But there's a couple things that like I said, I want to get people's heads moving to think about this, and especially the people who say that sort of thing, have them realize exactly, or make sure they realize exactly what it is that they're suggesting. Now, I also do think, because people always bring up when making these, not accusations, but when making these statements, they specifically usually bring up things like World War II and like, oh, what if these people had all just left the country or whatever. And I agree with the people completely who say that there is point out that there is a very big difference between, you know, going forward to meet an external threat coming into your country versus how you deal with your own country turning against you, whether that's a government and or the people, etc., like we're seeing in a lot of the countries around the world today, with these restrictions, with this lateral policing turning in their own fellow citizens and whatnot. So that's the first thing to consider. The second thing I usually say is, as a thought experiment, I always say, okay, let's say you convinced me. Who do we shoot? And then they're like, because I'm like, you have to realize what you're actually saying here. Like, this is what you're talking about. You're not, like, I agree with people who say that, like JJ recently had a video that talking about how everyone should get involved in their local governments. That's probably the best way that anyone can make a difference at this point, is trying to take over, county seats and things like that. But I also think that that is not going to change the long-term trajectory of these countries, U.S. or otherwise. I think that can and will make a difference in how things go in these local areas, but I think we're outnumbered. I think the government's already taken too much control, has initiated too much fraudulent activity that goes outside their scope of power or whatever. So I think that that's long-term not going to change the fact of whether or not people in a particular country will end up having to actually resist tyranny or not, in an absolute sense. So, like, when people say that, when they say don't run away, you have to fight, make them realize what they're actually suggesting and say, okay, what are you suggesting? Because, obviously everyone's familiar with the famous quote, it's too late to work within the system, it's too early to shoot the bastards, from, I think it was Claire Wolfe, like a libertarian author. But, and that feels like where a lot of countries in the world are at when it comes to overreaching governments or criminal activity, things like that. But so when they say, oh, you have to stay and fight, make them say exactly what they're talking about. Like, I know it kind of seems like Fed posting sometimes, and I wouldn't necessarily do this on social media often or public forums, lest people, you're encouraging people to get themselves in trouble, because I don't want people to come out and say certain things, people that I like, and agree with, necessarily get them in trouble. But I think a lot of people are saying this flippantly too, out of bravado and ego and things like that. And I also made a point recently on Twitter where they're saying, like, oh, something about some people running away to homesteads and everything. And I'm like, look, there's nowhere in the U.S., first of all, that's really in the middle of nowhere. It may feel like it when you're there, but you're not outside the reach of the government or anyone else. And there's no options for resistance of any kind that a person living on a homestead that's self-sufficient has given up. In fact, they still have any of the options of resistance available to them that a city dweller, an urban dweller does, in terms of getting involved locally or whatever. But they also have a lot more options, or certainly a lot more resilience to certain tactics, if they have any level of food dependence or independence, energy independence, space, and just area to work without necessarily constantly being watched and whatnot. So I still absolutely think that that's admirable and in no way constitutes like running away. And like I said, when the threat is coming from within your country, I think leaving the country is obviously an option. I think it would be stupid to suggest that people at various points in Germany's history were being cowardly for leaving the country and suggesting that they should have stayed and fought doesn't make any sense. Just simply being born in a place, I'm extremely patriotic. I definitely want to see America succeed, the America that we know and love, and I'm willing to do a significant number of things and sacrifice a significant amount in support of that. But just being born in a certain geographical area is not a suicide pact. And when it comes down to it, your immediate family and self, if you think it's best, but there's no reason to sacrifice your entire family for a particular country, which at this point is just a state, the government, when you can survive by going elsewhere. And obviously that's a fine line, giving up and fleeing at the first sign of trouble versus making an intelligent tactical retreat, whereas where staying would, just be suicide. So I want all the people who make these suggestions to really realize that. And the rhetorical device that I use, like I said, is I say, okay, let's say you convince me. Who do we shoot? And see what they say. Because I think then they realize like what they're suggesting. And I have yet to have someone actually answer that question, which is good. Because like I said, I don't want them to really say any of these things, certainly on social media, but I do want people to think about what they're really suggesting and maybe say, look, we all know that when the time comes, shit might have to get real. But running around telling people who are doing various types of preparation or moving and stuff and just charging them all cowards when for doing various things, it always reminds me of that quote from 13th Warrior.
I thank the Lord for his advice, though I don't recall hearing any exploits of his.
So anyways, let me know what you guys think, and like I said, be careful in the comments and whatnot. And once again, I just want to reiterate that this is simply a intellectual exercise going through the actual thought process and is no way suggesting or encouraging any particular course of action. And I know I'm certainly more comfortable knowing that if any sort of shooting does start of any kind, like someone breaking into your house or anything like that I'm fairly well protected with my Safe Life Defense 3A plus body armor with level 4 plates. And with the way stuff is going, price-wise, anything cool like that you need, I would pick up now. If you use the code RTW at safelifedefense.com, you get 10% off. And sometimes it even partially stacks. They're running a lot of promotions right now with the holidays and whatnot. Some cool new products of really light body armor. And just throw the promo code in there, RTW, and you'll make sure you have the best price. So thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon.